Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. It's titled Building Fabric Manufacturers, How to Get Specified, and it's brought to you by MBS. And we've also got some guest speakers on today who I'll introduce shortly. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we begin. All attendees' microphones are muted. If you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat or in the questions boxes within Zoom, and we'll follow those up after the webinar. Actually, sorry, I think it's GoToMeeting, isn't it, not Zoom? So yeah, we'll follow those up. If you want to find out more after this session, there'll be links provided by the guest speakers, but also if you're interested in the MBS products or tools, or if you've got any questions for us, or if you want to know anything about what we've been discussing, you can visit thembs.com or drop us an email at info@thembs.com. So the speakers for today, I'm Lee Jones. I'm the head of manufacturer solutions at MBS. Effectively work as a technical consultant within the company. So anything relating to digital manufacturing, I'm involved with different aspects within the company in regards to that. Prior to working for MBS, who I've been with now for just over 3 years, about 3.5 years, I worked in the construction product manufacturing sector for 22 years, I think it was. Got a lot of experience there, and if you've got any questions relating to these type of things, feel free to ask. It's not very often you get both sides of the fence from being a manufacturer and a prior MBS customer actually as well for a number of years, but also then having that view from this side of the fence now, actually working for the organization. Alongside me today is Phil Campbell from the Nfrc. Phil's the head of policy and communications, and Phil's going to be giving you a run through of the Nfrc, what they're about, what's happening in the industry and things that you should be looking out for, but also discussing MBS's strategic partnership that we recently made with the Nfrc to help promote things that are happening in the industry, benefits, etc., to both Nfrc's clients and to MBS's alike. So good morning, Phil.
Good morning.
Yep, we'll get over to you shortly. So yeah, I'm just going to give you a little run through of what we're going to be discussing today. But first of all, I think it's quick note to just explain who MBS are for anybody that's new. So MBS stands for the National Building Specification. We've been around for about 50 years. A lot of people might have referenced us as RIBA previously, or the RIBA, mainly because it was actually the RIBA that founded MBS. We were wholly owned by them up until the beginning of last year, when we were actually acquired by the Big Factor Group. Now, the Big Factor Group are an international technology firm that operate in the construction sector. We've got a map here that shows some of the locations that they actually operate in throughout Europe, but it is international as well. There's a large presence in Australia, Canada, a lot of territories within Asia, and so forth as well. But their vision is to become the leading construction and property information provider in Europe and across the world. MBS, as I mentioned, just has been around for the past 50 years. It's actually 49 and a bit, but if we round that up. Historically, it was developed to allow standardized specifications for the industry. And a lot of your customers, or if you're targeting specifiers, are our customers. We've got, it's around 4,000 different businesses that use the spec tools, MBS Chorus, to write specifications on a daily basis. But alongside that, through MBS Source, our construction product search engine, we actually represent quite a high number of manufacturers that go into the thousands as well. So yeah, if you are considering specification, we're a great company to talk to, and there's a lot of maybe competitors or similar businesses that you could look at as case studies as to what they've been doing throughout. So for this session, we're going to look at MBS user demand for building fabric products. We're going to discuss what is specification. So if you're new to it, or if it's something that you might not have touched on for a while, we'll get you up to date with what the industry is doing today in regards to specification and the avenues that you can approach to take that route. So targeting specifiers, there's a lot more to it than just getting in the written spec. There's a lot of research work, educational pieces, etc., that go in. So we'll discuss that around the marketing cycle. We'll look at some of the industry situations that are happening at the moment, and most notably sustainability and safety are the two key priorities. And I think the Nfrc are going to be discussing this with Phil's presentation as well. We'll then have a look at some customer case studies, and then towards the end of the session, I'll go into a live demonstration and I'll show you how the MBS platform works, how it's connected, so how the products listed within source can actually get you into the specification, but also how it can connect to things like the models and so forth as well. So without further ado, let's get going. So building fabric and specification. I think the most sort of important thing to consider when you're targeting specifiers and you're a building fabric product manufacturer, or whether you're producing the materials or systems that go in, is that there's a lot of elements that a specifier needs to consider. Just a few examples are listed there, and this list could go on and on. Obviously, just with roofing, there's a hell of a lot that you need to consider, but there's also walls, fenestration packages, floors, and so forth as well as the different design elements like the passive measures, etc., within the building. So within that context, it's quite common for specifiers to rely on manufacturers to assist with the specifications. After all, the manufacturers themselves and the contractors as well even are the experts in these particular fields. So if somebody's developing a building, this is a lakeside restaurant bin model that we've got on the image there, but simple little things like the fenestration, windows, glazing, etc., achieving certain U values. There's going to have specific requirements, or if they were looking at a green roof potentially, it's something that the manufacturer can guide the specifier on, and ultimately it can help build that relationship between the two and hopefully win the order at the end of it. So the MBS users, just to run out some stigma that MBS is strictly for architects. It's not. Yes, we do have a high proportion of our customers that are architects. Pretty much most of the architectural practices that you'll speak to in the UK in particular will be writing MBS specs. They'll be using Uniclass or cores through MBS Chorus. But alongside that as well, obviously through design and build, and obviously utilising the specification information through the construction and procurement phases. The contractors rely on it quite heavily, but also consultants as well. Particularly now surrounding sustainability and safety, consultants are becoming more and more at the fore at the beginning of the design, and obviously the preliminaries within the specification, so how the work needs to be completed and the contractual arrangements around that, alongside the sort of development spec up until it gets to stage 4 of the planner works, is quite heavily involved and engaged through consultancies. So yeah, it's a broad range of people that are using it and writing specifications. And likewise, so are the projects that they're working on. So no doubt, whatever sector that you're working in, the MBS system will be used across all the different areas. So whether it's education, leisure, commercial, or even residential, all of these things require that written specification. There's a hell of a lot that goes into it, but we'll cover how that works today and talk you through it. So where can you start as a manufacturer? Well, MBS has got the suite of products that can help with that, and we'll showcase those later. But a good place to take a look as MBS Source. It's a research tool where specifiers can come, they can look through thousands of different products in one place, and then they can add those to the specification. But as I mentioned, we'll get into the nitty-gritty and show you how that works later down the line. So how does specification work? So for anybody looking to brush up, or if you're new to it, let's give you a little bit of a run through of that. So specification is something that's typically always been done, but prior to 1973, it was quite fragmented and there was no standardized process for it. So MBS was founded, National Building Specification, by members of the Royal Institute of British Architects. It started as a paper-based tool where you'd have these templates that could be photocopied or copied and written down with descriptive specifications in. It developed to a floppy disk in the 80s, CD-ROM in the 90s, and it was downloadable through the noughties. But today, it's all cloud-based, it's collaborative, it works on a mobile, tablet, etc. And specifications are all now written through that platform. If it's not MBS that's being used, the likelihood is that the specifier will be using something like Word to write their own, but that comes with its own difficulties in ensuring accuracy of compliance and making sure that all the information that they're adding ends up to date. So it's become effectively the de facto standard for specification. The thing that we need to consider then is obviously descriptive versus prescriptive specs. And the difference between these two is a descriptive spec will explain what the product is and what it has to do. So in this particular example, this might be where if you've received a specification through to submit a tender for or to quote against, it might say contractor's choice or something on there. But what it will dictate is we need a product. Say we picked insulation as an example. It might say it's got to have a certain U value, meet a certain thickness, certain material type. But then it's down to whoever's procuring it to actually decide what manufacturer, which product it is. With legislation changing as it is, and obviously particularly around the safety and sustainability elements, prescriptive specs are becoming more at the fore. So this is where the specifier is actually specifying who the manufacturer is, what product it is, with the SKU, the specific performance criteria of that example product that's written within the specification. So there's a lot going on there, and from a spec breaking point of view, it's sort of aiding the value engineering piece where historically it's been seen, and to quote Judith Hackett, as a race to the bottom. So prescriptive specs are becoming more and more favoured, but descriptive ones are still there. But there's avenues of how you can then get into those as well if you are a manufacturer. So yeah, there's a lot that's going on there, but I think just the main thing to note is that it's changing, and specifiers are looking more and more to specify specific manufacturers' products and systems. There's not just the specification to consider though. So the journey to getting into that is quite a long process as such. If you think a typical building project that could last 3 years through the design phase, the procurement phase, until it gets to construction. Some of these are even longer. Some, yeah, are obviously shorter, but if we take sort of 2 to 3 years as an average, there's a lot that goes on in that time. So typically at stage 1 of the plan of work, there's a lot of awareness that's going on, and this is where things like CPD comes in. So if you are a manufacturer and you're looking to educate the architectural community on how products should be used, how they can comply with certain regulations or meet standards or things that they should look out for, hints and just general educational pieces on how they can specify that type of product, CPD is a great avenue. But the specifier will always be looking at products, particularly around building fabric, because the conceptual design tends to factor this in at the very beginning. So the building envelope performance is critical at this stage. So for building fabric manufacturers, having product information available in a digital format that the specifier can easily access, but also considering providing those educational elements like CPD can actually start that journey for you as early as stage 1. Going to stage 2, this is when the products and systems and the materials themselves then start to be defined a bit closer. So this is where your own website can come in. People are looking for things like literature, so what the performance criteria of a product is, or how it's made, what the location is, availability, that kind of thing. They might start to be considering those factors. Third-party certification, all sorts of information there, but generally it's gone from that brief knowledge to a little bit more of an in-depth review. And this is where MBS source comes in as well. We can list all of these aspects within the platform. Then get to stage 3. So the specifier is typically going to look at selecting products at this particular point. So as the specification's developing, MBS Chorus becomes more heavily used. So the specification will be written, and when we're talking about those descriptive and prescriptive specs, that's typically where that's done. So for the building envelope, the likelihood is that it will have a large element of prescriptive nature to it, particularly if you are looking to achieve certain thermal performance or reduce the energy demand on a building in particular, or meet certain fire safety regulations, for example. Specifying that is going to be done at this particular point, really. Then get to stage 4. So at the plan of work, this would be the technical design stage, and the end game for the specifier there is to finalize the written specification. So it's the last stage before things go into procurement and construction. So having the final written specification is a must. For manufacturers, this is sort of the last port of call to get into the spec. So having that built up journey prior to this through stages 1, 2, and 3 can assist with that. But you also need to factor in that maybe you could be looking at breaking spec if it's an existing manufacturer with a competitor product, something that's there. You could look at how could you get into this. There's always the opportunities within that. Then going to stage 5, so construction, procurement as well. Specifications used there to obviously build and procure things too, alongside material takeoffs, tenders, etc. But it's referred to quite heavily. And then lastly, once the building's handed over and it's in use, there's that re-engagement. So this is where your CRM systems will come in. So this is your internal customer relationship management systems. Obviously knowing what's gone into the project, what you specified with the client. If there's any refit later down the line or replacement materials and things, this type of thing can actually allow you to log all of that information and can make it easier for the facilities manager or the building owner, whoever it is, to replace products, materials later down the line, ultimately results in additional sales to your business. Few stats on MBS. We've got over 1,000 manufacturers on MBS source. I think if I remember correctly, it's sort of close to the 1,500 mark. We've got over 3,500 practices using Chorus, writing specifications, and last year there was over 50,000 project specifications created within the platform. So there's a hell of a lot going on there, and from a market perspective, it's a great place to try and get into the specification. And then alongside that, we've got a services library. So we've got a venture called SIS, where you can access relevant standards through a subscription basis, etc. That's used quite heavily by various different people throughout the industry. And again, that's got over 1,200 sort of subscribers to that. So that's specification briefly. If anyone does have any more questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we will respond to them. We respond to every question that gets sent through, but there are a few things that are causing a shift or change in the industry at the moment. So the first thing is obviously building safety. Wanted to touch on this. Going back to 2018, the Building a Safer Future was published, which Dame Judith Hackett governed and found that there was a lot that needed to change in the industry, which resulted in the draft Building Safety Bill. We've seen slight amendments to approve Document B. There's also other changes going on outside of the safety aspects to changes like Part L, and introduction of new parts, etc. as well. But from a manufacturer perspective, the Construction Products Association launched something called the Code for Construction Product Information. Now, this was launched in October last year. It's a voluntary exercise, and it does require a not-for-profit fee. So it's quite minimal, but the CPI website will show you that. But what this is asking for, and it's all been backed by government, and it's referenced quite heavily in things like the Transport and Infrastructure Projects Roadmap, the TIP 2030 Roadmap, is to set a benchmark for construction product information. So MBS have been involved quite a lot in this. We were the partner with the CPA for the research at the beginning, which had over 2,000 cross-industry respondents, where we assessed what product information is like at the moment, how it's surfaced, and the difficulties that specifiers find, or the difficulties that manufacturers themselves find as well, in producing information for the community. So the code was developed over a number of years from there. And I personally was on the digital working group of this, so I was involved in the development of it myself. But it's a great thing. It talks through 11 robust ways of working. So it considers everything from the sign-off process that you can see there, right through to having competent staff with robust training and all of the elements that are in between. To meet the requirements of the Code for Construction Product Information, there's effectively 5 acid tests that your business has to go through. The first one of these is Leadership and Culture Survey. So it's looking at how the business is governed, what the culture is within the organization. Then moves on to Management Systems Questionnaire. So it'll be looking at how your product information is managed throughout the business and outside of the business as well. So things like, are you using PIM systems, who owns certain specific data, and so forth. There's then an organization assessment to understand how information is passed throughout the business, what's happening with each individual sort of owner or stakeholder that's responsible for certain elements within each type. And then it gets down to the product set submission. And this is really where the digitalization of your product information will come in quite heavily. Having your data structured, providing all the relevant information, making sure it's suitable for use. And by that we mean that if somebody's looking for a specific set of information, is that there? Is it available? Is it easy to find? And importantly, is it clear and unambiguous? And then it gets down to the product set verification, where people will be signed off, they'll be certified against the code, and then that can be publicized throughout your own marketing means and on your website, that kind of thing as well. So highly recommend taking a look at that. The CPA's set up a specific website for this, so it's cpicode.org.uk. So if you wanted to take a look at that, please do. But the MBS will also be running a webinar dedicated to the code, where we'll have the CPA's marketing integrity group discussing this coming up in a few weeks as well. So keep an eye out for that one. It'll give it a bit more of a deep dive into it and discuss the benefits and requirements around it. In respect to sustainability then, there's been a lot that's been going on for a number of years. The RIBA set their 2030 climate challenge quite a while ago. We had the Climate Change Act back in 2008. These have been built upon and adopted by a lot of people throughout the industry. Obviously, the Climate Change Act didn't just focus on construction, but as an industry, we're responsible for about 40% of the carbon emissions that are generated globally. So there's a large focus and eye on us to make sure that we're improving this, and obviously building fabric is something that can help lower energy demand and the carbon that's actually embedded within the buildings as well. COP26 was in autumn last year, and it had massive news coverage. Firstly, because it had been delayed because of the pandemic. Secondly, because it was being held in the UK. So it was held in Glasgow in November last year. There was a lot that came out of this, and there's a lot that's going to be changing as a result. I think one of the key things to note within this is when Rishi Sunak announced that from 2023, all listed companies are going to have a net zero roadmap to show how they're going to achieve net zero by 2050, which is the government's target for that. And then alongside things like that, there's also things that you need to consider. So if you are looking at reducing your carbon, do you want third-party verification of that? And things like the PAS 2060 documents that is the British standard for demonstrating carbon neutrality are things that can help with that as well. But from a product perspective, I think with the building envelope, the passive measures is the big one that needs to be considered by the specifier. So passive measures, just to sort of give it a description, is the way of reducing energy demand by using natural heating, cooling and lighting whilst reducing energy loss via the building envelope. So we're looking at reducing the amount of energy that gets consumed, whether that's electricity, natural gas, whatever it is that's being used to sort of power and heat the building, but also keeping it thermally tight and with low U values to stop thermal transmittance, to retain the temperatures within the building. It doesn't necessarily have to be heat. Obviously in the UK that is a big focus because we have cold winters, but if it was internationally, it could be keeping the building cool inside so you aren't reliant on air conditioning and so forth as well. So certain elements that we'd look for as if you were a specifier is within roofing, for example, you want high insulation, low U values. You don't want any thermal bridging between the structures. If you're going into the walls, again, it's a similar story. So high insulation, low U values, and no thermal bridges there. But you're also looking for these things like airtight membranes. So if you're designing to passive house standards, for example, there's a bit of a saying that goes, keep it tight and vent it right. So the whole idea is to not have any air loss from the building, and then maybe use something like mechanical ventilation heat recovery systems to give you that ventilation within the building, to avoid the natural air leaks that you gain with a traditional design. For fenestration, triple glazing, sort of high insulated and low U value doors and windows. Again, it all revolves around the insulation, and the same thing with the floors. So as a specifier, when you're looking at developing this is really early, going back to that product marketing cycle. It's sort of stage 1, stage 2. you're starting to define these things, and getting this information from the manufacturers themselves is really where they start to look for this information. So getting your products, your materials, your systems listed, whether it's on your own website or if it's on a third-party website like MBS Source, and making sure that data is clear and structured so they can easily find it and reference it is an absolute must. It will help a long way. So yeah, something to consider there. And we have got some other articles on sustainability, specifying sustainably. How to become a sustainable business was a webinar we ran last year. So if you visit the mbs.com and on the manufacturers section, you can go to the events page. They're all listed within there if you wanted to reference those. So that said, how can you help the specifiers? So I think firstly, ensuring your product data is digitized would be the first recommendation. My prior role to working with MBS was actually as the BIM and digitalization manager for a large sort of international manufacturer. It was quite shocking when we began the BIM process. How fragmented the data was. It was held everywhere. It was on Excel sheets and PDFs. Sometimes it was in printed catalogs. And quite often, and most manufacturers will have this, they'll have that 1-2 people maybe that have worked for the business for 100 years and they've just got all of it stored up in their head. Now, that's great, and those people are invaluable. But for the person that's sat at the other end of a computer as your customer, accessing that is really, really difficult. So getting it structured can not only help with your internal efficiencies, it can make the process of information throughout your own business a lot easier, and obviously lowers costs once it's done. But it also helps your customers and the specification community to actually do their job more efficiently. So the likelihood of them reusing you down the line is then built into that. Providing third-party certification really helps, obviously around safety and sustainability in particular. This is a big focus at the moment. It's all well and good claiming that products meet a certain standard, or they've met a certain fire test, or they meet a certain U value, but if you haven't got somebody's independent verification to back that up, there is slight skepticism in the industry at the moment. It's not to say that what people are listing isn't honest, but if they've used in-house testing, it might not always be clear of how that test was developed. So third-party verification is a great thing to do. And likewise, have that listed with the information associated to the specific product, and it can help ease the pain for the specifier when they're looking at that. Again, as I mentioned, MBS Source can list all of this. It's all machine readable digital information that we structure to the standard MBS templates, so it can be brought straight into the spec, but we associate things like your third-party certificates and so forth, which I'll show later down the line. Promoting the life cycle value of your products. So energy efficiency, etc., is obviously a must, but looking at what the product is, where it's come from, how it's been made, what can be done with it at its end of life, is also something that needs to be factored in if we're going to lower the embodied carbon within the buildings that we're making as well. So there's a lot more than might meet the eye at first that the specifier has to consider, particularly in an early stage with building fabric. So consider that. And promote the sustainability of your company as well as your products. So MBS, for example, we have been measuring our carbon emissions, scopes 1, 2, and 3 now for the past 3 years. We've been offsetting carbon through verified certificate standards and so forth. These are great things that people are now looking for. It also, yeah, you should be doing this because we need to improve the industry, we need to improve the climate, but also if you're looking to get business, your customers are looking for this as well. They want that supply chain that's got these types of credentials, so go there. And then potentially as well BIM content. So a lot of the industry now is working with BIM. It's sort of become the norm. It was mandated for public funded projects back in 2016, but it's filtered down obviously to all sorts of project types. The MBS's digital construction survey and the report that came out at the back end of last year from that identified that it was approximately 70% of the industry had adopted BIM now. So it's gone from being a sort of a niche, sort of nice to have thing to basically what people are looking for. Now, if you make waterproof membranes, for example, yeah, you can still have BIM content that does that, but I think the key thing to note is that BIM's not just about 3D models, it's mainly about the data that's inherent within them. So getting that data structured and digital can certainly help people and yourselves on that journey to becoming BIM ready. So yeah, something to consider, and I'll show you how things integrate within Revit as well in the demo later on. But yeah, I think I've spoken a little bit on myself now, so I think it's probably a good time to bring in Phil from the Nfrc. So as I mentioned earlier, MBS and the Nfrc have a partnership where we actively helping the community between both of our client bases and education on things like digital sustainability, fire safety, that kind of thing, amongst others, but also helping to promote both businesses and what we do through each of that. So yeah, on that note, I'd like to introduce Phil. And Phil, I think you've got some slides to talk through, so thanks very much for joining us.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Lee. So my name is Philip Campbell. I'm Head of Policy and Communications at the Nfrc. So the National Federation of Roofing Contractors celebrating its 130th anniversary this year. It started all of those years ago as originally an association of slaters and slater merchants. And now we're much broader. We represent the entire roofing industry, and that's the whole supply chain from roofing contractors who make up the bulk of our membership, but also manufacturers, merchants, and also service providers. So we stand for quality in roofing, and we recently brought on a new head of careers, and we have developed a careers service, which is something quite unique in the sector that has all the information somebody looking for a career in roofing, whether that's for a manufacturer or for a contractor, in one place. We also do quite a bit of lobbying to make sure that our voice is heard as a sector in government, the Construction Leadership Council, and elsewhere. And finally, something that's really important for us as a trade association is dialogue through the supply chain. So as I mentioned, we don't just represent contractors, we represent the supply chain as well. So we have many manufacturers in membership who are represented through our roofing suppliers group. And that's really important, particularly at the moment where we have long lead times on certain products, but also we're seeing quite a bit of inflation at the moment due to global events. So when those situations happen, it's really important to have that conversation as a supply chain, encouraging that collaboration between suppliers and contractors. So where is the roofing industry going? So I'm just going to build on some of Lee's points in terms of building safety and sustainability and how that applies to the roofing and cladding industry. So Lee has already mentioned the building safety bill. So that's going through the Houses of Parliament as we speak. I believe it's currently in House of Lords. And while there's quite a lot of consensus around the bill, following Dame Judith Hackett's Building a Safer Future review in the government consultation, and there was a slight change in personnel, and Michael Gove took over as the Secretary of State last autumn. And since then, he's had a slightly different change in direction. He calls it a building safety reset. And there's been quite a few amendments to that bill. I believe it's about 120 amendments tabled there. And that will have consequences for the entire industry, including manufacturers. So it's worth taking a look at those if you haven't already. Some of the big changes in that bill, I won't go into too much detail, otherwise I'll be here all day. But there are a few things for construction product manufacturers that you should know about. So you will have the Building Safety Regulator, and that's a brand new position that's being created within the Health and Safety Executive. And that will be regulating the bill and looking at things like competency and duty holders. But you also have the Regulator for Construction Products, which again is a new regulator. And that will sit within the Office for Product Safety and Standards, which is in phase. So that's where the construction product side of things will be looked after. There is very little detail about that at the moment, but I imagine once the bill becomes law, that will be scoped out. So it's definitely one to keep an eye on. As Lee's already mentioned, alongside the official regulator is also the voluntary code for construction product information. And as Lee said, that's a really important piece of work, and I believe it's going to be formally launched very shortly. So I would strongly encourage manufacturers to sign up to that and to embed those principles and practices, which are so important, not just to building safety, but just generally to run a well-oiled machine in terms of promoting the right information and marketing that right information in the right way. And that ties in so well to the golden thread of information, which is going to be a key principle as part of the building safety bill. And all of those duty holders that I mentioned earlier will be required to implement the golden thread when working on high-risk buildings. So it's really important that manufacturers have that data ready at hand in a digital format to provide to your clients. And finally, a really core part of all of this is competency. And that's not just the competency of the installer, but the competency of those working for manufacturers as well. And what we're doing as a trade association here is really trying to enhance the competency of the roofing industry. So we developed the Roofing Accreditation, and this is the only accreditation scheme for roofing operatives. And by passing a knowledge test and demonstrating compliance with health and safety, they can achieve an accreditation, which is recognized by a number of clients and the wider industry. So it allows roofers to demonstrate their competency and then revalidate that every 3 years. So that's a really important initiative, and it's funded by the CITB. Linked to that as well, we have taken that model and tried to apply it to the rain screen cladding market, and we developed a really important pilot on this, which you can see in the slide here. And that is really looking at supervisors and their competency. And hopefully we can then take that model and expand it to the wider industry. A really important theme as well as building safety is sustainability. And again, Lee's already touched on some really important points here. But what does this mean for roofing in particular? So just before Christmas, we published some research with the University of Southampton around climate change adaptation and the built environment. So what this research found is that even if we mitigate the impacts of climate change by reducing temperatures and maintaining them to 1.5 degrees, there will still be quite a lot of significant climate change happening in the UK. So we will see warmer and wetter winters, we will see hotter summers, and we'll also see a lot more extreme weather events. So that's heat waves and also extreme rainfall, the likes of which we've seen in recent weeks and months. And so that's going to obviously have quite a big strain on the built environment, particularly through things like flooding and also overheating. The good news is that if we specify and construct our roofs in the right way, we can help them mitigate a lot of those impacts through technology, conventional technology like insulation, like Lee's already touched on, good ventilation, but also through new technologies. So, green roofs and blue roofs, but also cool roof technology as well. So this report goes into a lot of those different examples and how those can be utilized to really kind of reduce the impact of climate change on our built environment and ultimately the people living in those buildings. We're likely to see a growth in solar PV on our rooftops, particularly at the moment with the energy crisis that we're going through. The government are really looking to alternative sources of energy, and solar really is up there. And the fantastic thing about rooftop solar is there's so much potential there. If you think of all of those roofs across the country that could have solar PV retrofitted onto them, there was a real big potential there. And places like Southampton, for example, potentially have 25% of their energy demand could be met through solar PV on rooftops. We're seeing some quite significant policy changes in this area, which is likely to see a greater demand for solar. So Part L, as we know, is changing. We've got initial uplift this year, and in 2025, we've got the Future Home Standard. And it's likely that home builders will choose solar PV as a way of meeting that uplift because it is easier and the supply chain is more developed than, say, for other alternative technologies such as air source heat pumps. So we're likely to see that solar is going to be growing, and we know that house builders like to work with roofing contractors because they're already on the roof and they can build this PV as part of a built-in system rather than doing that separately. So we're likely to see roofers becoming more diversified and actually providing a more solar offer as well as just proposing slating and tiling. And linked to that, for the commercial sector, we know that business rates are changing in terms of how they treat on-site renewable technologies such as solar as well. So we're likely to see a growth there in the commercial sector. And finally, there's going to be a greater demand, as we know, for low carbon products. So, obviously greater efficiency and reducing waste, but also alternative low carbon products like low carbon concrete, for example. We're likely to see greater demand for that, and that will again highlight the importance of having good construction product data when clients are asking questions about the carbon, embodied carbon in a product. So what does all of this mean for digital? Well, Lee's made some really fantastic points already about this, and that's very much something we support as a trader federation. We are doing lots of work in this area to help prepare the roofing industry for a lot of these changes that are coming. So manufacturers, as we know, produce a significant amount of data. And as Lee said, is often in lots of different places. So it's important to bring all of this together in a structured and consistent way, and to ensure that it's secure, verifiable, and interoperable as well. And that's been really well set out recently in the IAT's guidance for digitalization for construction product manufacturers, a plain language guide. So I really recommend reading that if you haven't already. It's a really good starting point on that digitalization journey. So digital construction product data is going to be really important to both those two themes that I've just touched upon there. So when you're looking at the golden thread, that's going to be at the heart of the building safety regime. And clients are going to be asking really important information about those construction products. And manufacturers need to have that information ready. And if you have it all in the digital format, it's clear and well structured, then that makes your life a lot easier. The same is true for net zero. If you're not producing things like environmental product declarations, and that's definitely something to explore, looking at the embodied carbon of your products and the life cycle analysis of those products as well. So when clients are setting net zero targets, you know about your products and the net zero impact of those. And finally, it's not just because it's the right thing to do, but it's also quite a commercial imperative to start digitalizing a lot of your data. And I thought it's a really interesting study in this IAT report from IBM that they did with a construction product manufacturer in 2020. And they looked at their turnover before and after their digitalization journey. And they actually increased their revenue by 1.56% in a year. And it's predicted that they will increase that by 6 to 7% over the next 5 to 6 years, just because they've digitalized their construction product data. So there really is a commercial incentive there, as well as doing it because it is also the right thing to do, and particularly with those two themes that I've touched on. So I'd like to thank NBS and Lee for inviting me on to the webinar today. And I'm sure I'll share my email address at the end if everyone has any particular questions in relation to my presentation. So thank you very much.
So joining me is Andy Leggett from Bauder. Andy, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I work for Bauder. Bauder are one of Europe's largest waterproofing and insulation manufacturers, based in Germany. We have over 7 factories basically making a mixture of PIR and waterproofing materials. They're a 4th generation family business run by the latest generation of Bauder brothers, Mark, Tim and Jan. In the UK, we specialise in everything flat roofing. So our main purpose is to supply clients with systems that basically are tailored to make their tailored for their specific roofing requirements. We supply a range of products from single ply membranes, bitumen membranes, insulations, liquid products, all the way through to green roofs and PV systems. So we pride ourselves on basically supporting clients from the initial stage of their project all the way through to completion.
Excellent. So yeah, I mean, for any of the specifiers that are dialing in, Bauder's products are all available to view through the MBS platform. Which brings me on nicely to the next question, Andy. Why did Bauder join MBS?
Well, one of the main reasons that specifiers use Bauder is that we provide them detailed specifications, and most specifiers that I deal with, and probably Bauder as a company, do use MBS in some format. So as a company, to basically make sure that we can provide them with the specifications they need, we obviously need to be part of the MBS platform to do this.
Excellent. And obviously prior to that, how did you work with specifiers before joining MBS?
Before Bauder joined MBS, we would probably provide specifications in more of an analog format, Word documents made up of relevant execution clauses specific to the Bauder products. But obviously, we actually still use this for refurbishment. But I would say most of the new build projects we get involved with are MBS format. So we obviously need to be able to offer that format to our clients.
Good stuff. Good stuff. And then just roughly for anybody listening, how long have you been with MBS? And have you seen any benefits, obviously, for your business? I know you've just discussed some there with the new builds.
Yeah, so I believe that Bauder had been with MBS since about 2005, which is before my time at the company, but I did ask about, and yeah, so probably since about 2005. And with more and more specifiers now using MBS, it's essential that manufacturers like Bauder are able to supply them with the specifications and the format they need. People come to us for our input into the projects, which obviously includes specification. So if we can't supply them with the specification and the format they need, it's obviously detrimental to our company.
Sure, sure. I mean, obviously something like flat roofing can be quite complex, can't it? So having the manufacturer working with the specifier on that's quite a key thing to making sure that the spec's right, I suppose. So yeah, I mean, you obviously subscribe to MBS Source and MBS Chorus. Could you tell us a little bit about what your favorite feature or element of MBS Source is?
Yeah, so I think actually Bauder were one of the first roofing manufacturers to join or have products on Source. And although my experiences with MBS Chorus and Source are relatively new, what I've been quite impressed with is the amount of information available to specifiers. Obviously, as a manufacturer, we want to get our products and systems out into the market, and Source is a perfect library for clients to do this. And obviously, it has lots of information in one place as well, so it prevents the need for specifiers to go from a website or to a phone call. So it's all in one place. Obviously, as a manufacturer, we would obviously prefer to provide our specifications to clients directly, but this is a good source for them to be able to look up Bauder as a company, and it has a lot of technical information on there as well, I've noticed. Not just information about our specifications, but things such as third-party certification, literature, and a whole spectrum of technical information.
Sure. I mean, there's a big industry push for more clear and unambiguous data. I mean, you've only got to look at what's happening with things like the CCPI and the other industry changes. So, no, great to hear that. Great to hear that. You also are one of the manufacturers that subscribe to MBS Chorus from a spec writing perspective. So I know you've alluded to being able to provide specs to the specification community, but is that the sole reason you chose to join MBS Chorus?
I would say so, yeah. So Bauder subscribed to Chorus probably a couple of years ago because we were aware that this was the new cloud-based format that specifiers were starting to use. Obviously, in the past, it was things, other formats, more desktop type formats, but this was the way things were going. And although we're still at an early stage with it, over the last few months, probably a year, perhaps a bit longer, we have seen a large increase in specifiers asking for specifications in the format of Uniclass or Chorus. So to be able to, as a company, to make sure we can keep up with the demands and expectations of our clients we work with, it was essential that we join Chorus.
Well, yeah, it's great. It's great that you mentioned Uniclass there. Obviously, I mentioned that earlier on in the webinar, and it's roughly a 60-40 split between the old Cores MBS specs and Uniclass now, and Uniclass is ever growing. So, yeah, any of the manufacturers that are listening, it's something that you really do need to take into account. Yeah, I think just to sort of wrap up, obviously, we're trying to keep it short and sweet because people listening in have obviously got to get on with the rest of the day. But is there anything else you'd like to share for us to include in the webinar that you think might be helpful to anybody listening?
Yeah, I'd say from my recent experience with MBS, I've seen many benefits for both specifiers and manufacturers. MBS being a cloud-based platform basically allows multiple users to obviously work from anywhere on the same specification from a range of devices. And from a manufacturer's point of view, one of the things that I'm particularly keen with and happy with is the fact that they can invite us into their projects. And we've seen a little bit of resistance, but hopefully when they see the benefits of being able to invite a manufacturer into their project, it does help with collaboration between manufacturers and specifiers to work on their project. And as we've mentioned, it's very important now that specifications are technically correct in terms of fire performance and guarantee cover. So, from a client's point of view, being able to invite a manufacturer in to do that, it can only be of benefit to everybody.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's something MBS are pushing on the collaboration side of things. If anybody's listening and wants to know a little bit more, whether you're a specifier or a manufacturer, just drop us a note and we'd be happy to show you through what the benefits are, other than time-saving efficiency through having manufacturers such as Andy and Bauder to do this for you. Obviously, from a spec point of view, it's increasing that accuracy as well through complex systems. So yeah, I think on that note, Andy, we'd like to say thank you very much. We'd love to sit and chat for longer, but we're getting close towards the end of the webinar. So thanks very much for your time. We really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll hope you have a great day.
Brilliant. Thank you, and you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that was great case study from Bauder there. What I'm going to look at now is how the MBS platform works. So we're going to talk you through MBS Chorus, how the specifiers use that to actually write specifications, what MBS Source does, and how that can get your products into those specs. We'll also take a look at the background, so what sort of analytics, etc., you can get from MBS through hosting the products, material systems through the platform as well. But also we'll take a look at some of the tools that we've got that can help with things like structuring your own information on your own website. So we have a web integration tool that's free to all source to and upwards contract users that you can actually embed those MBS product listings with the relevant spec classification information and so forth into your own website quite easily. So yeah, so this is the platform. I'm just going to jump off the PowerPoint because it's a live demonstration. So just jump into this. So this is MBS Source, first of all. So MBS Source, for anybody that's not familiar, is an online product search engine. You can come like you can with Amazon or Auto Trader, wherever it is, and search for thousands of products in one place. Now for the specifier, whilst having the information on your own website is great, and they will find you that way potentially through Google searches, particularly if your SEO's up to standard, etc. But having everything in one place makes it a hell of a lot easier for them to do. I mean, you've only got to look at something like a car insurance comparison website where you could happily go and look at each individual website and fill the details in and have a look for things, or you could do it all through one and it comes back with all the results. So MBS Source very much has that prerequisite. So if we were going to look for something, I mean, let's just have a look for roofing at the minute. We'll just type that in as a generic term. It's come back with 2,197 results. Now, not everything within there will be everything that you're looking for, but then in a similar way to most modern web browsers, you can go through and you can filter the different things. So if we were looking for extensive green roof systems, we can click on that, and then we can start to filter down by the products. We can look at these by specific manufacturer, what literature we've got, and so forth within their case studies and things too. But just jumping back to MBS Source itself, for people that are familiar with MBS, MBS Source is effectively what replaced Revit Product Selector. So if you were familiar with Product Selector, or you were a prior customer of that, MBS Source is the tool that replaced it. But alongside that, it also integrated the National BIM library. So the BIM content's available through here as well, which it wasn't initially through Product Selector. And you can actually access the CPD material through the RIBA CPD site through here too as well. So we've rolled all of the three that were separate MBS products into one, and that's what MBS Source is. Landing page, there's a little video here if you want to see how it works. After the session, you can go and take a look at that. We can look at your recently reviewed products so it remembers what people have been looking at through the cookies and so forth. We've got a promotional opportunity, so people can have featured manufacturer brands or products. Might be something great if you've got a new product introduction coming in, you're pushing that out to the market, just promoting it through the landing page there could be quite easy win. Different categories, again based on knowledge, so things that have been specified quite heavily. And just information on how you can get involved. At the very bottom, we've got some articles, so things how MBS can help you. So we've got one here on what is golden thread, bit on BIM, spec writing, but on the mbs.com, we've got a whole load more extensive sort of knowledge articles on everything from sustainability right through to how to write specification and beyond that as well. few case studies, testimonials, and then we've got some links to some of the free tools that MBS provide as well. So particularly surrounding BIM, we've got plugins for Revit and ArchiCAD, which the spec tools work through as well. If you're looking at creating your own BIM content, that data, as I mentioned earlier, has to be structured within that. So we've got a free share parameters tool that can give you the outline template to do that as well for each object. But how that all connects to the spec. So if we look for something like, I don't know, say UPVC window, let's pick on a different product type for now. You can see that I've typed that incorrectly there, but obviously it's got quite a educated algorithm in the background, so it will bring in the similar things that I've bought requested there, so we can have a look for that. On plasticized polyvinyl chloride windows, we can go and we can take a look at a load of different options within here, but I'll just pick on the first one. It's one from Spectus. How the product listings work within this is we'll have some nice images. You could have pack shots, so just the image on its own of the product, or you could have it in an ambient sort of setup where it's actually, in this case, you can see the room behind, it's in the wall. We could have lots of different things there. Importantly, we've got application. So this is where you can stipulate where products are suitable. Now, this might seem obvious, but for something like insulation, for example, to the specifier, they might not know is that suitable for floor, wall, ceiling, loft. You never know. So having the application is quite key, and one of the first things that we list within there. We then have a description. So these are standard product characteristics. So regardless of what your product is, that you will have these sort of set titles and information that can go in against it. Now, this is where you can add some of the features and benefits. So some of the marketing sort of information that you might want to add in and revolving around your product can go within there. This particular case is Windows, so they've added information about the hardware and the operation. But then extending that general information, we'll have things like color, material, size. All of these things power the filter in the search at the beginning. So in a similar way to Amazon, if you were looking for, I don't know, a 50-inch TV or something like that, you could look at ones that were 4K or that were LCD. You'd hit the filters on the side and it'll only show you the ones that meet the criteria that you're looking for. So that is what powers that in the background. Moving on from them, though, and this is where it starts to really link into the specification. So the first thing MBS need to do when we list a product or a material or system for a manufacturer is to classify it. So this allows that product to fit the template that is developed for that particular product or system. In this particular case, we've got the Uniclass reference and we've got the cause reference. So cause is common arrangement of work sections. It's what most people will be familiar with as an MBS building spec. And for Windows, for example, it's L10. And then the relevant categories sit underneath that. One thing to note with Uniclass, however, though, is this classification type is very, very much on the rise. Going through the MBS sort of list of projects at the moment, it's typically a 60-40 split between cause and Uniclass. So for Uniclass itself, that means that out of all the projects that you could potentially be tendering for or have the potential to get involved with, 40% of them, the specification is going to be written using Uniclass. Now, there's a couple of reasons for that. One, when we're looking at containing a list of information about what's in a building at asset component level, Uniclass does that a hell of a lot better. So in the future, when we've got certain requirements, maybe surrounding the golden thread of information where data needs to be contained at asset level in a digital way on a common data environment, accessing that through a Uniclass spec is a lot easier to understand from the outset than it is with cause. It has a very clear hierarchical tree that goes from elements, which could be an airport, for example, to an entity, which could be the departure lounge, to location, could be the restaurant areas within that departure lounge. And then those locations are made up of systems, which in turn are made up of products, and it filters down like that. So this is a product, it's a window. It forms a PR code at the beginning to identify that it's a product, and then the 8-digit code afterwards is what depicts what this is. Now, regardless of what language that's written in, whether it's in French, English, German, Italian, Spanish, Chinese, the code remains the same. So it's a very easy to follow international standard of classification as well. The next thing to mention on that, though, is that if the project is a BIM project, the likelihood is that the specification will be Uniclass. The reason for that is Uniclass 2015 was initially initiated for BIM use. So when the government were mandating BIM for public funded projects back in 2016, seems crazy that that was like 6 years ago now, and the build up obviously to it for 3 years where there was all these race for people to get BIM ready prior to it. It was identified that they needed an improved classification system over cores, and Uniclass was what was developed for that. So much so that the UK BIM framework, and in particular British Standard Annex of ISO 19650 Part 2, actually recommends that if it's a BIM project, it should be using Uniclass as specification. So I think that's probably a long-winded way of explaining that if you're a manufacturer, you need to consider writing specs in Uniclass, or at least providing the information structured to Uniclass, as well as the old traditional MBS building methods that CORS gave you. Further down that list then, we have the specification information. So this is where we'll start to identify all of the relevant performance criteria of that product against a template. Now, MBS have been doing this for the best part of 50 years. So we've got a template for any material product system that you can think of. Product data templates and structuring that within the spec system is really what our USP is for the specifier. So we take that burden away from the specifier of having to know what they need to fill in when it comes to the specification. We provide the template for that. And going one step further, if the manufacturer is listed through source, it can auto-populate it, which I'll show you in a moment. So we'll look at relevant information. In this case, with a window, there's things like the U value, so what that is there, what the energy rating is from the British Fenestration Council. Again, likewise, if this was a roofing product, it could have Nfrc information in there. It might have third-party accreditation, like BBA certificates or something like that could be listed against it. And then all the relevant information, options, etc., that are available within that spec get listed against that too. We've then got literature against this. So this could be the operation and maintenance manual for that product. It could be the installation guide. It could be a warranty certificate. Anything like that can be uploaded and associated to the specific product. Now, going back to the CCPI that we mentioned, this is one of the requirements that's been mentioned there, is having ease of access to the information that's for that specific product. So through listing with MBS source, it's actually helping on that journey, and a lot of the requirements around product information are actually covered through the source listings within that as well. If the manufacturer had BIM content, at the bottom you'd have the option to download the Revit, Vectorworks, ArchiCAD file, whatever it is, IFC that they wanted to download within there. Then likewise as well, for that manufacturer, we've got similar products and systems that you can specify through those. So this is obviously Spectus, and it's showing other those products. If it was Bauder that we heard from the case study earlier, to show you some of different Bauder products as well that you could list. So it's helping to demonstrate to the specifier what you can do other than the product that they're looking at. So if we stay with this and this unplasticized polyvinyl chloride window unit that we can see there, how would something like that be specified? So this is MBS Chorus. It's completely cloud-based. We did have historic tools that were still being used as early as the beginning of last year. However, through the pandemic, because Chorus is cloud-based and the old tools weren't, when pretty much every specifier, whether they were architects, contractors, or whatever, were forced to work from home, and in many cases on their own personal device because the desktop was tied to the office at the desk, Chorus was a savior. So much so that we saw, I think it was around 1,500% uptake in use of Chorus, to the point where we got that few people still using the historic tools that we decided to stop supporting those at the end of last year. So today, if somebody's using MBS to write specification, Chorus is the platform that they're using because it's the only one that we now have. So this is Chorus. We can create projects within here. So you can see we've got an example that's set up here for these new town offices. You can create master specs. So you can see that we've got some examples within here. It might be an office master. It might be a manufacturer's master if they're writing specifications. And to save time, particularly for the specifier, they might want to use similar things time and time again. So take something outside of building fabric, for example. I used to work in the sanitary ware industry, and I think probably 9 out of 10 schools have the same products put in them time and time again. So if you're a manufacturer that is involved in the spec process, having a list of specific products for certain building types can help save time and a lot of efficiency gains there for the specifier. So there's ways that you can do that. You could work collaboratively with the specifier if you had Chorus for Manufacturers, which is available as a subscription, or you can actually develop the specs and publish those in a typical PDF and Word format within there. But it's just a case of picking the specs that they want. Just jump the webinar meeting window out. You can take the ones that you want. They might not want this particular spec going in. And then we can take this and we can literally just copy that to a project, or if it was a project spec that we'd written, we could copy it to a masters and we can build them up that way. You can copy it to the clipboard and paste it in as well later down the line if needs be. There's a whole different load of routes that you can do for masters. But looking at project specifics, we were going to specify that window. So I'm going to jump into this existing project that we've got, Newtown offices. All of the information is contained around that project. We can actually look at who's involved in writing this specification. So in this particular case, it's a demo. We've just got some of my MBS colleagues set up within there, but this could quite easily be a design and build where you'd have the main contractor that's controlled in the specification, but they would then give access to the architect, potentially subcontractors, and even the manufacturer if need be to go in and write specific parts of the spec. That's all be controlled within there. And then they'd write the specification within this particular part here. So to add a specification, this particular case, we're going to look at fenestration because I'm going to use the window example that we showed there. So we can put fenestration spec within there. We then pick the content set. And you can see that we've got international classification systems because we don't just operate in the UK, but we then pick whether we wanted cores or Uniclass if it was a UK project. So I'll pick Uniclass for this example, click save, and that's now created the folder effectively where that specification can be written in. Once that's done, we then start to look for the products. So if I look for plasticized PVC windows, don't have to type it in exactly as it is. The algorithm in the background will actually recognize what I'm typing. If you've made spelling mistakes or there's a lot of terminology that we use in the industry that the classification might not be specifically listed against, it'll actually recognize that as well. It's quite intuitive and it'll bring in the ones that you want. So this is what that window is classified against. We just click the add button to add the template in for that. And that template is now in specification. So once my internet catches back up, there we go. I do apologize. I've had a little bit of issues with the web this morning. It's been a little bit slow. We'd have some descriptions in. Now this might be glazing. I don't know. Let's say to rear of building. It could be anything. We're just picking something here as a out of the air example. Alongside this, every time we click on something, so it might be fire resistance, for example, what you'll notice is that the guidance changes on the right-hand side. If we look for weather performance, again, it jumps to the relevant section. Now, this is one of the things that a lot of people don't realize what MBS do. Back in Newcastle, where our office is based, we've got a large team of experts. These are engineers, chartered architects, you name it. We'll have a specialist civils and landscape. They're all involved in there. The salary bill is obviously quite huge for that, but these people are going day to day, going through all the relevant industry bodies, they're meeting with people, trade partners that we've got, looking at the relevant standards, legislation, how things is changing, and they're constantly developing this guidance in the background to make these templates, one, as up to date as possible, but if a specifier is considering something, it's giving them that knowledge base there to know what it is that they need to be looking for within the products. Another way of doing it, though, if the products are then listed with an MBS source, what we can do is we can actually specify directly from here. So if I wanted to add this spec to this window in, I could click add to spec. I could jump into Chorus through that way, copy the product, and then I could go in and I could actually paste that in. So if I do Control V, it's brought that in, and I can check that information. It's all listed in there, and I can add that product in. Now, what it's done, all of those requirements the template was asking me for, it's pre-filled it. It's got the manufacturer's brand with the chip. If we jump on this, it'll take me to the manufacturer's landing page on source. It's got links to connect with them, telephone, email, web address. It's got the chip for the window. So again, it'll take me to that product listing if I wanted to reference that further down the line. But then anything that has an option, I don't know, say color, for example. Let's have a look where that is, color and texture. It's available on lots of different finishes. So we could go through and pick the one that we wanted and select and add that in. All the options are available there to then just build up the remaining bits. But just discard that for now though, and show you how it would work if we weren't specifying directly from source. We would click on manufacturer. I need to bring in these lists. So likewise, it might be a Spectus one that we're looking for. It could be a different manufacturer in this case. So let's have a look at this one. All of these listings in here are exactly as they are listed within MBS source. They're formatted to the MBS data templates, and for the reason being is when you click this add to spec button there, it will automatically drop that manufacturer's products in there, and you can pick the options again throughout it. So that's how a specification could be written. If it was a descriptive spec and not a prescriptive spec, obviously specifying the manufacturer makes it prescriptive. The specifier needs to go in and actually fill in all of this manually using that guidance there, which obviously is very time consuming. So the quick win is to specify the manufacturer's products. So we see a lot of uptick in that use. Next, what I wanted to show you was in the background. So once we got the listings, we've got the MBS partner platform in the background. So you as a manufacturer can log in here. You can see your analytics. So every time somebody's added one of your products, systems, materials to the spec, it comes into here. It's configurable by date range, so we can go and we can change that to suit whatever we want. But within that period, I think is it last month. This is obviously a dummy account. As you can see, it's MBS, so nobody's actually specifying MBS. These figures are usually a lot higher than that, but you can see that it's been specified this many times in that given period. It's had 53,000 odd impressions. People have looked at it 1,500 times. We'll have outbound clicks, so not only is it getting in the spec there, it's diverting traffic to your own website, which is great because there's obviously no competitors on your own website. You can see what country projects are in, etc. But then we can also filter down to product level. So within that, we could then look at who's been specifying what. And again, this is purely made up information for the MBS demo page here. But if it was your own information, you'd have the practice, the project name, where the location was, what date they'd done it, and which the product it was that they'd specified. We can jump into that even further, and then we can start to look at how many times that specific product has been specified itself. So again, going back to if it was a new product introduction that you got, you could sort of monitor the popularity of it through specification over time. The next thing to mention in here, obviously this is where we manage all your listings. So if you are listing your products, etc., that's all managed within here as well. And you can monitor and manage all of your company information, logos, your contact details. So again, going to the CCPI, it's asking for primary contacts, technical contacts, details within that information, and the ease of access to those for people that need to call somebody or email somebody. You can add those in, and you can build primary contacts, secondary contacts. So say you had sales reps that were based around the country, you might have regional one for each I don't know, county, for example. You could actually have a list of those for allow people to filter those in. You can add your social media and web links in for further marketing reach. There's a load of different things they can do. But looking at the compliance and getting your information structured on your own website, by far probably the coolest thing that we've got within here is the web integration. So those source listings that you have can actually be embedded within your own website. You can do this by product category, you can do it by all products. So if you were, I don't know, say roofing manufacturer and you had green roofs, blue roofs, brown roofs, you might just sell the waterproof membrane separately. You could list those individually, you could list them by group, you could have all products in one lump. You can change the text to suit your own branding, the coloring, etc. You can copy that to HTML or embed a code, and then your web developer can then push that into your own website. So in a bit of Blue Peter style, is one we made earlier, and this is an actual manufacturer. This is Cooper's Fire, who make active fire prevention systems, and in this particular case we're looking at their FireMaster active fire curtain. What they've done is they've embedded the MBS listing within their own site. So within their own company website now, their data's digital, it's machine readable, it's structured, it's got all of the relevant information that it needs to meet the requirements of the specifier. If they were going for compliance against the Code of Construction Product Information, again, it would help with meeting the demand from that as well. But critically, in there too, it's now spec ready. So all that information's in there. If I was a specifier and I was looking at the manufacturer's site and then I was then going to add that in, it's got that add to spec button. So likewise, what we did with the window, if we had the spec template, we could do that Control V and drop that straight in there as well. The last thing to show then would be the BIM content. So I'm just going to close this screen and switch over to Revit, and I'll be back with you in a second. So what we can see here is Autodesk Revit. So from a BIM perspective, Revit's arguably the most used software in the UK. The MBS Digital Construction Report showed that there's been about 80% of the design software that's used in the architectural community now. There are others, ArchiCAD and Vectorworks are two common ones as well. MBS have plugins for those, but for the demo today, I'm just going to show you how the BIM content works within the software itself. So what you can see on the right hand side is the MBS plugin, and all of those digital objects that are available in MBS source are available directly within the BIM software here. So it's just as simple as picking the one you want. We can go and look at it through in there, and all the data is available to view. But from an adding to the model perspective, it's as quick as adding add to model. You'll note that it's saying here update from 2015 to 2019. BIM software isn't backwards compatible with revisions of software. So what we have to do is create the objects in as early a version as possible, which then means that regardless of what future release of the software your client's using, they're going to be able to open that and access it. So we just click upgrade for the first time. It's then going to open this object. And you can see that we've now got the Metro Tile UK Limited metal tiles. We've got a little model there, something very basic with it being a roofing object. In this particular case, if it was a window, it'd be more three-dimensional, obviously, to suit the profiles, etc. But what we can see if we click on this now is within the data set, we've got all of that manufacturer's information. So gone are the days when you used to have a separate CAD drawing, or back in the olden days, even a board drawing with a disjointed spec, separate material takeoffs, etc. It can all be scheduled and done now directly from within the model itself. So all of that data inherent to that product, whether it's performance criteria, information relating to the warranty, the sizes, dimensions, links to the product information, data sheets from the manufacturer or their website are all contained within this. So I'm just going to copy this onto my clipboard and then jump into that 3D model that we just had open. And then I'm going to paste that into this model. Nice and simple. Works very, very easy. And we've now got that in there. Obviously, we don't want to leave that on the floor, so we'll just delete it out. Now, what I can do is the generic roof that we've set up originally, I can select that, and then I can go into the list of the things that we've picked here. You can see that we've got some other options that we might have used elsewhere, but the one that we've just dropped in is this particular one, and we can drop this in, click OK, and that's now added that in. There will be some adjustment on thicknesses. Obviously, we've just gone from, I think, a really thickly insulated metal tile roof system to quite a thin metal tile with no insulation, and so there'd be some adjustment there. But if we now click on this, what we can see is that all of the data that's relating to that product is now within the model itself, and that can be scheduled. You can work out the square meters of your roof, etc., and so forth from within there. Additional to that, what we can then do from within the software itself is we can actually access the specification. Now, what we can see here on the right-hand side is MBS Chorus, and that spec that we were looking at earlier on within the software itself can be accessed from within there as well. We can sync it to the model, so we can actually attach the building component to the specification. That's great from a perspective of making sure that the model and the spec are tied in together. It also will flag up any errors if somebody changes the spec or changes the model and the other one hasn't been updated, to make sure that the two are both kept aligned. It can help strengthen the potential for value engineering to make that a bit more difficult to do, obviously, in having to update two different documents in one go. But more importantly, make sure that what's been specified and what's in the model are the same to ensure that the building is as safe as possible as well. Okay, so that was the MBS demonstration of the platform. I hope you found that useful. I'm just going to do a wrap up and summary. So key takeaways, I think first off, to get specified, engage with specifiers early. You can do that through BIM content and quality specification data. So it's something that you need to consider if it's something that you're not doing. The products are in demand through the MBS platform at the moment. We've just seen an example of that through the demonstration. So if you want to know more about MBS Chorus or MBS Source, drop us a note and we can help. Notably, things around your product safety, the performance and the sustainability credentials are high on the specifier's agenda today. So you need to make those known. If they're not easily accessible, whether you're listing through Source or whether it's through your own website, get those structured and get them listed against the relevant products. So yeah, next steps. If anybody wants to know more about the MBS, we can certainly help you with listing functionality or assistance with getting into the specification. You can visit the mbs.com/manufacturers or call or email on the number or the address there that you can see, which is manufacturers@thembs.com. We do offer a free technical consultation with one of our industry experts, depending on what it is that you want to discuss. It could be a different person within the organization. We've got quite a diverse team of expertise within there, but if you're looking at things that are maybe the aspects that are driving specification changes, if you want an overview on BIM, a little bit more in depth on there, or how you could best position your products, or even just a one-to-one demonstration on how the platform works and a deep dive into your specific product category, just drop us a note. We've obviously heard from the Nfrc as well, and if anybody would like to contact them, I'll flick to the next slide. So these are the Nfrc contact details. So I'm sure Phil and the team would be happy to, again, chat with you on any needs that you have there if you're a contractor or a manufacturer or even a specifier that's looking at roofing and requirements around that as well. So on that note, that ends the session for today. Keep an eye out for the forthcoming webinars that we've got. As I mentioned, we've got one definitely in the next few weeks on the code for construction product information. It's part of our marketing masterclass series, but there'll be a lot more coming from MBS and also from the Nfrc as well throughout the coming year. So thank you very much, and we wish you a pleasant day. And thank you, Phil.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Bye-bye.